I was only 22 when I came to this small, snowy town in the northern United States with the man I had just married, believing that marriage would be my safe place, my new beginning. Our little wooden house had a blue framed bedroom window, and I remember thinking it was the prettiest thing in that home. For the first few months, everything seemed peaceful. He was gentle, attentive, almost protective. But slowly, that protection turned into control, and control turned into fear. He started asking where I went, who I talked to, why I breathed differently than yesterday. He timed my visits to the grocery store and accused me of meeting someone if I came back a few minutes late. One night, after I returned from the market with frozen hands and a tired heart, he threw my purse against the wall and shouted that I was unfaithful. I stood quietly in the corner, staring at the blue window as snow fell outside, pretending the silence would protect me. Day after day, I found myself waking up early just to sit beside that window, letting the cold morning light fall on my face, telling myself that one day I would breathe without fear. He began deciding who I could talk to, when I could leave the house, even how long I could stand by the window. I would often press my forehead against the cold glass, feeling like the outside world was alive while I was slowly dying inside. I didn't tell anyone what was happening, not my neighbors, not my family, because shame grows like mold in a quiet house. But deep inside, a small part of me kept whispering that I wasn't meant to live my life inside someone else's cage. Still, I stayed, because leaving felt impossible and surviving felt like my only job. The months that followed felt like an invisible war being fought inside the walls of that house. A war where only one person had weapons and the other had silence. He would ignore me for hours, sometimes days, and then suddenly explode over something as small as a misplaced cup or a towel folded the wrong way. He slammed doors, broke dishes, and once locked me inside the dark storage room until I cried quietly enough for him to feel satisfied. I learned to speak softly, move slowly, and breathe only when he wasn't looking. My days were filled with cleaning, cooking, and pretending everything was normal, while my nights were spent standing near that blue-framed window, watching the streetlights flicker like tiny promises of freedom. Sometimes I would see neighbors walking their dogs, talking, laughing, living, and I wondered if anyone could see the fear hiding behind my curtains. Once when I stood too long at the window, he grabbed my arm and said, "What are you staring at? There's nothing out there for you," and pulled me away like I was a child caught sneaking candy. But that window was the only place where I didn't feel completely trapped. It was the only reminder that the world still existed beyond his anger. When he drank, which became more often than not, he'd pace the hallway, muttering to himself, and I'd quietly slide to the floor beside the window, holding my breath until I could hear the steady rhythm of his footsteps fading into sleep. Every morning, I would tell myself that I just needed to survive one more day, that someday I might find the courage to walk out. But courage feels heavy when you're alone and no one believes your pain. I felt like a ghost inside my own home, only visible when he wanted someone to blame. And yet, deep inside, a thin thread of hope held me together, a hope that my story wouldn't end inside those walls. The night everything changed was a night filled with thunder and heavy rain, the kind that shakes the windows and makes old houses feel alive. I was standing by the blue-framed window, watching the storm tear through the streets, when he came home, angry, drunk, and louder than the thunder outside. His eyes were wild, and when he saw me by the window, it was as if the storm inside him doubled. "Didn't I tell you to stay away from that window?" he shouted. And before I could step back, he pushed it open so hard that the frame shook, then slammed his fist through the glass. The crash echoed through the room, and shards fell across the floor, some landing near my feet. I didn't scream. I had forgotten how to. He pointed at me, breathing heavily, and said, "If I catch you standing here again, you'll be more broken than this window." Then he left the room, and I stood there staring at the shattered glass, realizing that the only thing that ever gave me comfort had been destroyed in seconds. But as the cold wind came rushing in through the broken frame, chilling my face, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of clarity, a realization that if I didn't leave soon, I would never leave at all. When he finally fell asleep in the living room, I quietly picked up a coat, a small bag, and my worn-out diary. My hands were trembling, but my feet felt lighter than they had in years. I opened the front door, and the storm hit me like a slap of freedom. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I walked through the rain-soaked streets, drenched but breathing, really breathing, for the first time in a long time. The wind that once slipped through my window now wrapped around me like a shield, pushing me forward. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. I ended up at my neighbor's doorstep, shaking from the cold and from years of silence finally breaking inside me. She took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. She called the police, and for the first time, someone actually listened. At the station, when they asked what had happened, I didn't give them all the years of pain. I just whispered, "I want to live." They sent me to a women's shelter, and for the first time in decades, I slept in a place where no one shouted my name, no footsteps thundered in the hallway, and no windows needed to be guarded. The quiet felt strange, almost too gentle, but I let myself learn what safety sounded like. A few weeks later, I was moved to a small apartment provided by a local support program, and when they asked if I wanted anything from my old home, I surprised myself by saying yes. I asked for the broken blue window frame. It wasn't beautiful anymore. The glass was gone, the wood was cracked, but it was the symbol of the moment I finally chose myself. When the officer brought it to me, I held it like a fragile piece of my history, not something to mourn, but something to respect. Now, years later, I sit by a new window every morning, letting the sunlight touch my face just like it used to. I breathe freely, eat slowly, laugh softly, and live gently. People sometimes ask me why I keep that broken frame hanging on my wall, and I tell them, because it reminds me that even broken things can lead you out of the darkness. I am an old woman now, but every day I choose life again. And every day I thank that cold night when the wind came through the broken window and whispered, "Run." And I did, and I never stopped.